boys and girls. Today Anna Katie's going to read Mr. Brave by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Brave by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Brave is not as strong as Mr. Strong. He's not as tall as Mr. Tall, but that doesn't stop him from being brave, as you will soon see. Now, last Tuesday, little Miss Bossy invited Mr. Brave to tea. "And don't be late," she shouted down the phone. There's Mr. Brave, Mr. Tall and Mr. Strong. It was a very stormy day, but Mr. Brave knew that little Miss Bossy's temper was worse. So he set off for little Miss Bossy's house, hurrying along as fast as he could, to be sure that he was not late for tea. There he is, going through the stormy day to little Miss Bossy's house. Along the way, he heard a cry for help. It was Mr. Messy. There's Mr. Messy. He'd been blown into the river by the wind. Mr. Brave did not want to be late for little Miss Bossy, but being the brave fellow he was, he jumped in and rescued Mr. Messy. Wet right through, he hurried along the lane. Suddenly, he heard someone sobbing loudly. Who could it be? There's Mr. Brave, sopping wet from the river. It was little Miss Somersault. She was balancing on a tightrope tied between two tall trees. "Oh, Mr. Brave, I'm so lonely," she sobbed. "No one will come and play with on my tightrope. They're all too frightened of heights. You're so brave. Won't you come and join me?" There's little Miss Somersault sobbing away on her tightrope. Wonder if Mr. Brave is going to help her. Mr. Brave looked up at little Miss Somersault. Then he thought about little Miss Bossy. But being the brave fellow he was, he took pity on little Miss Somersault and climbed up on the tightrope. There's Mr. Brave, about to climb up on the tightrope. They chatted away happily for a while until Mr. Brave happened to look down. "Little Miss Somersault, look! The rope's going to snap. We're going to fall. And it's such a long way to the bottom. Oh, calamity! Oh, help!" he cried out in panic. "Be brave, Mr. Brave," said little Miss Somersault, trying to help him. I think he's a bit scared. And without more ado, she carried him safely back down to the ground. "Oh, thank you," said Mr. Brave with a sigh of relief. They're both on the ground now, safe on the ground. Little Miss Somersault said goodbye, and Mr. Brave was left on his own, shaking like a leaf. "I don't deserve to be called Mr. Brave. I was scared stiff. Thank goodness nobody knows my secret," he said to himself. And nobody does know his secret, or do they? There he is, shaking like a leaf. Poor thing, was so scared. Little Miss Trouble just happened to be passing and had seen everything. And what she'd seen and heard had given her an idea. A very naughty idea. She grinned a mischievous grin. "Hey, come here, everybody, come and see this," she shouted at the top of her voice. There's little Miss Trouble. Very quickly, a large crowd gathered. "I have an announcement," announced little Miss Trouble. "Do you know that Mr. Brave isn't brave at all?" "No, it can't be true," said the crowd all together. "It's true," said little Miss Trouble, "and I'll prove it to you." There's all the characters. Wow, look at them all. Maybe some of them we haven't met yet. "Mr. Brave," she continued, "I dare you to walk across that tightrope." There's little Miss Trouble and Mr. Brave. I wonder if he's going to do it. Mr. Brave looked up at the tightrope, and all the crowd looked up at the tightrope. Then all the crowd looked at Mr. Brave. Mr. Brave suddenly remembered something. A very important something. "Just look at the time," he cried. "I'm going to be late for tea at little Miss Bossy's." "Mustache," he cried. and he ran off as quickly as possible. There he is, running off to little Miss Bossy's house. Hooray! Cheered the crowd, and they all clapped and applauded Mr. Brave. Little Miss Trouble looked puzzled. Why are you all cheering him? She cried. He ran away. He isn't brave at all. Oh, yes, he is, they all shouted. Would you turn up late for tea at little Miss Bossy's house? Ooh. Little Miss Trouble thought for a moment. Gosh, he is brave after all, she said in awe. Mr. Brave by Roger Hargreaves.